script into that. So I apologize for any issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll go ahead and call to order this committee of the whole for the Johnson County Board of Commissioners on Thursday, April 13th, 2023. We are just after 2:00 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara. Here. Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Kelly.
I am here as well. All are present, and we'll start today with a presentation of board priorities. This presentation comes after these priorities were established at our board retreat. I'd like to welcome the panel of staff, Penny Post Oak Ferguson, Julie Cairns, Joe Connor, and Joe Waters to discuss these priorities. We'll see this presentation that'll recap our discussion and also then review the proposed language for these priorities. With that, let me turn it over to Ms. Post Oak Ferguson.
Chairman, thank you. Chairman and Commissioners. So we are coming back, as the Chairman said, from the retreat and the work that you all did with the priorities. So what we did is worked on those and put them in language, what we thought we heard. And so we're here today to follow up with you, have a discussion, and then ultimately ask for action. And as you can see on the agenda in front of you, we'll remind you what our current priorities are. We'll show you the slide that we, the consultant did your final work on this before we left the retreat, or not final, but the work that you did at the retreat summary. And then we'll go through what we did with each of those priorities. We'll take them one at a time and share with you the context we put it in, and we just try to reword it based on what we heard. So it's for confirmation, and if you guys have changes, then let's make the changes, and we would appreciate that direction. So that by the end of the committee of the whole, we're asking for a vote to say, to authorize staff to bring them forward for final action to board meeting next week, if you're ready for next week. And if you have amendments, to include amendments. So that's the plan for today. So we'll just go to the next slide. This is a reminder of your current priorities. You did see this at the retreat, but as a reminder, major capital planning and major projects, transit, vulnerable populations, and promoting community health, and then innovation and effective and efficiency. So that's a reminder, as you all know, pretty aware that those are in place currently, that these would replace. So this is the slide that the consultant, this should look familiar to you because the consultant showed you this at the retreat. And this is a summary of the information. Based on the discussion that staff heard, as you discussed these, we have a draft for your consideration of each of these. So we're going to start with housing on page 5, and I'll turn it over to Joe Connor. We worked with, each manager worked with several department directors that volunteered or have expertise in these areas to draft a summary statement and impact statement for your consideration. So with that, Joe Connor.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Joe Connor, Assistant County Manager. First off, I want to start by thanking Jay Leipzig and Megan Foreman for helping me produce this part of the document for today. So just to start with the summary statement, again, based on what we think we heard from the retreat itself, that the summary is to convene stakeholders and other partners to improve housing options for the resident needs identified in the Johnson County housing continuum. We thought that was an important statement to make because the housing continuum has been before you all. It's been kind of adopted as our high-level playbook, and so we want to stick with that. So on the impact statement, we tried to capture elements of the housing continuum, but focusing on the ones that we're kind of working on currently. So we're talking about a safe, stable, and attainable housing is a foundational element in an individual's life and the overall health of a community. Current activities include planning for those experiencing homelessness, vulnerable populations, and justice-involved residents, and supporting attainable housing projects across the continuum. So those are some of the activities that we're currently doing now. A few weeks ago, we had the session on intervention centers, and I think the problem-solving beds, and so that's part of this continuum. As you're aware, we funded, or you have funded, a housing or homeless study, operational study, feasibility study. That's in progress. So we feel like these two statements kind of capture things that we want to work on now and then also into the future based on that housing continuum. So with that, would stand for any questions, and if there's real technical, where's Jay? He's right, Megan, right back there.
Thank you very much, Joe, Jay, Megan. And to get kind of up to the high level here, the idea of these priorities aren't to list specific metric driven goals, but instead to provide guidance as we move forward our board priorities over the year. So while I appreciate this statement, I agree with this statement, this doesn't list everything we might do as it relates to housing over the next year. Is that fair to say? Penny,
Yes,
do you want to address
the
that?
approach we took on these is to share with you, like Joe did, examples of action steps that we would take under these. And we plan to give you regular updates on these as well. So you're correct. Each one will have examples of action steps, but it's not meant to be exhaustive on that level of detail. We first wanted to confirm with you all that we've got the right ones that you all say, yes, we need to either tweak them or change them, or yes, that's right. So we go forth and do more of the detailed work.
Thank you very much.
I guess we also want the flexibility to be able to change if something changes in the environment. So if something happens in the next 6 months, it makes sense to do something sooner, we want to be able to do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Fast?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been working on,
Microphone.
one of the things I've been working on with staff was, the minor and major home repair, and we allocated ARPA funds. I mean, that is not just vulnerable, because our minor and major, very few people qualify for it anymore because the appraisal our appraised values are so high. Joe, how do you see that fits in? Because that is really, a major project that we're going to be working on.
Yeah, I think if you look at the impact statement and the word stable, I think that's where it keeps, that kind of program will fit underneath keeping people in their homes and keeping that house stable, for the environment. And so while we didn't list it specifically, I think you're exactly right. There are funds allocated, and those things are being worked on.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanslick?
Oh, thank you. I was, just wanted to say, I think this looks like a good statement, and I appreciate I know it took hard work to pull all that together. And, while it is not specific and exhaustive, I think it's makes its point and reflects what we had discussed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several clarifying questions, no particular order. One of the things that has been talked about over the last couple of years is that dealing with this issue is not a county issue. It's a multi-community issue, the city. So do you feel that this adequately reflects our role? You say convene, and I think by implication you also mean to facilitate, but that our partners are the cities, and that's going to be our emphasis. Is that you think that's adequately framed here?
We do, and I think that we would use the term, this is a community problem, so it's
Okay.
bigger than just counties and cities, bigger than government.
Fair enough.
So,
Okay. Next
that's-
clarifying question. Okay, the last sentence under impact, it says, and justice-involved residents. Could you elaborate on what you mean by and justice-involved residents? Is that the criminal justice, or is there a social justice, or?
yeah, so justice involved was a term we used from that presentation from a few weeks ago, and that's what we're trying to stick with, is criminal justice. And
Criminal justice, okay, well, I just wanted to make sure, very good. And under homelessness, the intent is to cover the broad expanse of the definition of homelessness. Is that adequate just to say homeless? Because, they're chronic homeless, there's transitional and transient. I mean, it's not just a single population. There are lots of elements. You think that captures it?
yeah, and I think based on our current activity, I mean, we're looking at what would a homeless system look like, what would a center or a shelter look like? So those kind of things would be included in that whole spectrum of being in the homelessness
Well,
category.
but the intent is to address the issue of homelessness and not necessarily build a shelter. And I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but that, we're not advocating that at this point.
No, we are not.
Okay, very good. And one personal privilege, Ms. Cairns, is this your first time before us?
It absolutely is.
Well, welcome, welcome.
It's my honor.
Made sure to let you have it. Commissioner Allen Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this all looks good, and just to go back, on the 2 years that, myself, Commissioner Hanslick, and Commissioner Fass worked, along with Jay's team, we had numerous meetings with outside organizations, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So none of this was intended to be something that the county was going to take on themselves. It's all about partnerships. I know one thing I try to work on within my own, district is to work with the cities to help with some of those housing needs. And again, it's a partnership. So I think you've done a good job summarizing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Hara.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Ashcraft's question on justice, I think we ought to add criminal justice in that. Also, we have been hearing how property taxes are really impacting the residents of Johnson County. And, there's, like in Spring Hill, there's some people that within the last 2 years, that their valuations have gone up 30 to 35% combined. And that this is really putting a real strain on their budgets. And I think this morning that we heard Galena Van Horn talking about how she has to take into consideration how she sets her thermostat, that it's 80 degrees in the summertime and 63 degrees in the wintertime, and that she's making hard decisions, and that the increase in property taxes is just making it more and more difficult for her to stay in her home. So I would like to be able to put that the county is cognizant of the impact of property taxes and how it is making it difficult for some people to stay in their homes, and that we need to be cognizant of that when we are presenting or when we are adopting our budget. I think that needs to be included. And my other question is that currently in our budget and housing and planning, approximately $1.5 million of costs are in there, and it's based on federal funding. And my question is that how are we going to pay for that if and when the federal funding ends? And I know that I have been assured that will not happen, but we really are coming into some economic issues that are going to really impact us. And I think that we need to be cognizant that we built up this bureaucracy and it's dependent on federal funding. So I just think that it needs to be addressed.
I'll respond to those three questions a little bit, and then Joe, I'm sorry, I know you had a response as well. On the first, on the criminal, whether you put criminal justice or not, I would ask that you allow us to check with the staff, because my understanding is that justice is involved is kind of the industry terms for a reason, and I'm not sure I could articulate that today. But if the board is willing for us to bring back a recommendation to either leave it because of these reasons, or to insert it if it's not an issue when we bring back these, if you would allow that discussion so that you have more information when you make that decision, that would be my request. So I asked the board for that. The second one is being cognizant of property taxes. I think you've heard me say in every budget presentation that we are very aware and factor that into our recommendations. We also listen to the board. We hear the community. We understand that there's always a balance when you're putting together a budget of fiscal stewardship, of quality services, and there's a balance with that. So whether you want to put that in here or not, I'm just saying that I agree it's something that we as staff and I think the board takes seriously. So how the board chooses to put that in, I will look to the board overall. And then the third one, on the federal funding, it will be a policy choice. If the funding went away, it will be a policy choice for the board to either end the program, reduce the program, or choose to fund it, or prioritize that against another service. So it would ultimately be a policy choice. So those are some thoughts. Joe may have some others, and then I look to the board to how you want to address these requests.
No, I just think on the last point, Penny, that my only comment was going to be, those are very tactical, responses to what these statements mean. We would bring these back, as Penny said, as a policy choice, as a program offering, something for you guys to decide on before we get into it. So that's the tactical side of it.
On the federal funding piece?
No, I appreciate the recommendations and the thought behind the wording that's been chosen here. I frankly think it doesn't need the additions that Commissioner Harris had suggested. I think when we say justice-involved individuals, I know that that's an industry term and a term of art, and so I'd prefer to keep it that way and not add criminal, especially when we're talking about justice-involved individuals who are victims. So I think that the term is fine. And as for the being cognizant of taxpayer resources, we always are. And I don't think we need to put it within this priority or the others, because it's an overarching understanding that we have all continued to adhere to. With that, Commissioner Allen Brand, and then once everyone's had an opportunity to speak on this, we'll get direction, keep this moving.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and even though I appreciate what Commissioner O'Hara was saying, coming from law enforcement, my background, and saying similar to what the chair's saying, that term criminal just really labels people, and even if you did do something wrong and you're considered a criminal, nobody wants to hear that. So that would be the only thing I would caution. And then also, I think that, we're talking about personal taxes and people's situations. I think it's a bigger picture going to the state to try to work on some, freezing for seniors, or I think that's another I think that's another whole, which I appreciate her, because I know, all of us think about that every single day, but I'm not sure it's something we're gonna fix. Our appraiser has a formula that he uses, and it's a bigger picture.
Commissioner Ashcraft, did you have additional comments?
I wanted to follow on to something Commissioner O'Hara said, if I could.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Hara, I appreciated your comments, and I think it's a valid observation. I would frame it a little differently, and maybe we're not on the same page, but the issue on this one, as with all of these, is, and Mr. Chairman, you and I may have some disagreement too, is not just be cognizant of, but to state that as we go through these priorities, that the cost benefit, the value proposition is absolutely necessary, because we can't do everything for everyone at once. We've got to show the cost benefit, and I use the term return on investment. Some of these will, you use the term low-hanging fruit. Others may have ready partnerships with the cities, and all that has to be considered, and that should be our emphasis, because it does have an impact on stakeholders, property taxpayers. So I don't know if that's what you were trying to say, Commissioner O'Hara, but that would be a sensitivity of mine. Surprise, right, Joe?
Mm-hmm. So to me, that sounds more like a value statement, and that's great. I think if we were to go through and label out all the value statements that we consider when looking at any items, we can put together a pretty verbose list. I think the purpose behind these is these are priorities that were established by the board. Doesn't mean it's the only things we're going to focus on within the year. Keeping the community, keeping the lights on, or whatever it may be. There's other things that we're going to do, but these were established as priorities. Not the only things that we value, not the only things that we're going to do, but the priorities for what we want to accomplish within this year. I think everyone's had an opportunity to speak on this. I'm going to move that we move forward with the priority for housing as written and ask for a second on that.
Second.
All right. Ask the clerk to take a roll on this housing
Do
priority.
do we get a chance to speak after the motion, as we do in a board meeting?
If I can
Ms. Tran.
clarify, you wanted the motion to be to direct the staff to move this priority on housing forward, then that would be a motion on the floor, and then that's when, if you want to amend anything, once that's on the floor.
Okay. And I appreciate the clarification that we're directing staff to move this forward, and we'll do it with all four. If you'd like an opportunity to speak again, Commissioner O'Hara, you're welcome to.
Yes, thank you. Return on investment is one element of the property tax issue, but overall, we just have to learn to live within our means, just as every other business, families. Inflationary pressures are really difficult for everyone, and we're going to have to deal with it. And we're going to have to be very cognizant of the additional pressures that we're putting on people if we increase the property taxes to the level that I'm concerned about. The other thing is that I would like to have staff define justice for me, since we can't use the word criminal justice. I want to understand. I want to understand the definition of justice.
Well, I can certainly check with the Corrections Department or somebody else to get you a definition, but the way I understand it is if you're involved with the justice system, so to your point. Chairman,
And
if
it's,
you're-
and
you're-
the justice
Let
system.
me finish, please. If you're a victim in the system, or if you're a perpetrator in the system, or if you're just a family member in the system, it's if you're justice involved.
All right. Commissioner Hanslick?
Oh, just looking it up online, most every resource has the similar, and what is a justice-involved person? And it has a hyphen between justice and involved. It's a person having contact or interaction with the criminal justice system, primarily through police, courts, or the corrections system. So, I mean, it's a commonly used phrase, justice involved.
So should we add that? Because I think that Commissioner Ashcraft had his request and question, is this social justice or is this a criminal justice? And I think that we need to have the clarification. So I would be glad to add that language as an amendment that Commissioner Hanslick just quoted. Could you quote that again, please?
There's like 6 different, they're all the same.
That's just one example.
That's just, I mean, it talks about
So can you?
moral righteousness and.
All right, I appreciate it. Let's keep the meeting
But
organized, and I appreciate that, and you're going to be welcome to make your motion. I just ask folks to allow one person to speak at a time. So if you have particular language you'd like to add, Commissioner O'Hara, through
yes, I would
amendment,
like
go ahead.
Commissioner Hanslick to read that first line again.
There are numerous.
I know, but you read,
Just one
yeah,
definition.
just one, so that first definition that you read.
The one I read says, "A person having contact or interaction with the criminal justice system, primarily through police, courts, or the corrections system."
That's the language that I would like to add as an amendment to this.
Could I, Chair, to simplify that and to keep it concise and moving this along, would it just be what you're wanting is, and criminal, well, we'd have to reverse it, residents involved in the criminal justice system? Is that what you want?
Yes, that would be fine, and I had thought about that, but there seemed to be a real reluctance to use the word criminal.
It is. It's usually, we don't want to label people. So
Yep.
that's why it's best practice and evidence-based and all of those.
Right. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Which item are you asking for a motion
This is,
on?
This is the second. Commissioner O'Hara made a motion to amend this to add the language that Commissioner Hanslick had read, and
Now-
commission, and that's the motion that has been made
So
at this
I'll
point.
second.
Okay, that's a second. All right, is there any further discussion? I think it's common sense and unnecessary and convoluted in this, but I'll ask the clerk to take a roll on that motion.
Commissioner Fast,
Aye.
Commissioner Myers,
Myers, no.
Commissioner O'Hara,
yes.
Commissioner Hanslick,
Hanslick, no.
Commissioner Ashcraft,
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand,
Alan Brand, no.
and Chairman Kelly.
No, 3 votes in favor, 4 votes against. Is that consistent with your count?
That is correct.
Very good. Motion fails. So I'll ask at this point the clerk to take a roll on the original motion.
Commissioner Fast,
Aye.
Commissioner Myers,
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
No.
Commissioner Hanslick,
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft,
No.
Commissioner Allenbrand,
Alan Brand, aye.
and Chairman Kelly.
Aye, 5 votes in favor and 2 against. Is that consistent with your count?
That is correct.
Very good. Moving on to infrastructure.
Okay, next is infrastructure, and Julie's going to lead this, and because she hasn't been here super long, I may jump in and help.
Thank you. Julie Cairns, new Deputy County Manager. Pleased to be before you for my first time. My group, we discussed the infrastructure priority. The statement, Johnson County will remain focused on the pursuit of completing, updating, funding, and implementing strategic plans in support of our growing and expanding community region while continuing to maintain our existing infrastructure. And this statement was designed to acknowledge, kind of like you were just discussing, there's a lot of things that we're doing in infrastructure that will continue to be done, and they're certainly important, water, wastewater, things like that. The impact statement is more specifically focused on what we're looking to accomplish over the next 2 years. And that impact statement, as drafted, is to identify needs and seek partnerships to deliver initiatives for the rapidly developing northwest portion of Johnson County while creating an area development plan that will include not only traditional land use, but also transportation, transit, and broadband infrastructure. With that, I'd be glad for discussion.
Very good. Obviously, a crucial topic as we continue to grow as a county, but also to maintain the services that the county provides. We appreciate you putting this together. Commissioner Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very well done. Does that also include the mapping of roads and is that also addressing that? Of traffic? Traffic.
Flow?
I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely. So in the, so of course we have some large development and rapidly
Right.
occurring development. So we will be working on all those emerging immediate needs, but it would also be part of the overall area development plan.
Okay, I appreciate that because of all the, it's not just locally in the district I live, but it's global, so to speak. But thank you. Good job.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cairns, does this include, kind of broadly speaking, emergency services like MEDAC and PSAPs and maybe sheriff's resources? And I was going to say IT, not just broadband, and Mr. Nixon's not around, so maybe it's one and the same, but also AI and the use of traffic and transportation development. I mean, is it captured in here?
Well, you said a lot of things.
Right.
As Julie said in the opening statement, if you read the broader statement, it's infrastructure could be a long list. And we,
Right.
you know, a lot of things that we do as core services, we're going to continue to do. What this was intended to do is focus on the next 2 years. As Julie said, the next 2 years is kind of our focus area. Well, the thing that we're all extra focused beyond the normal day-to-day is the impact that Panasonic and that area has on our county, the region, et cetera. And so, so some of those components will be in there. As we look at the development plans, for example, we'll have some of those folks around the table, but it's not intended to be all-inclusive, everything that you listed.
Well, If I may, just as clarification, as one of our priorities, if you reflect on what Mr. Pedic and Crowd brought before us last year about the transportation plan, working with cities in terms of developing that network, we have a role there, and depending on how you define it, we can focus on the external, the rural areas, or we can coordinate with the cities through the CARS program and other things. And I was just wondering if that's intended to be part of this, or is there a plan, kind of an appendage out there that's not necessarily part of this priority statement?
Commissioner, we did talk specifically about the CARS plan, that one I recall, and we had a lot of conversation about how a number of these items are not just infrastructure, but also operations. So when you talk about broadband, you have a infrastructure piece, and then you have an operations piece, and the same thing with transit. I don't know if Jay would have anything that he would like to add, because he was part of the group that worked on this item.
I think when you know, as Jay comes up, when you hear the stakeholders are involved in the discussion for the development plan, there are a lot of those players in there, so maybe that'll help, but Jay?
Yes, Chairman and Commissioner Jay Leipzig. I would say, yes, that was the intention, that we'd have include traditional land use components such as infrastructure, the broadband, the land use objectives, but also ensuring that's consistent with what the cities are doing, as well as in our unincorporated area. And it's truly, I guess it was envisioned as an area plan that would encompass all of those components together.
Thank you, Jay. And I know this is going to be a hot topic for you over the next year. And I think the priority does need to be that physical infrastructure. Like was mentioned at the retreat, we talked about not only Panasonic, but also the airport and the continued growth that we're seeing at the airport, and making sure that we get the nuts and bolts in place, and forgive the lack of a better term there, is what we need to prioritize now, so that we're ready for cities like DeSoto are laser focused on standing up here in the next year and a half. So, Jay, I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, to your point, though, this focuses on the northwest portion. I think you make a valid argument about the airports. I mean, the intent is beyond northwest, is it not?
I don't think that you can put necessarily Northwest just in a box in and of itself. I understand that while the priority, we seek to develop partnerships, deliberate initiatives to develop the northwest portion of the county while creating an area development plan that will include not only traditional land use. I don't think that means we are exclusively working at the northwest, but that is the priority given the necessity right now. And I think development at the airport is included in that residual growth and need that we're seeing because of the growth in the Northwest.
Well, is Commissioner Allenbrand, in terms of
Well,
your South District, you're okay with this?
Well, I think I agree that it's not, this was just a focus that we talked about during the retreat, so I feel like it's past that, but, you know, I always want to put my finger up because I want to talk, but, you know, the staff's already, Brian and his team and Jay, you know, the meetings that we're already having to go ahead and create that relationship, you know, with the cities is already happening. I know he meets on a regular basis with the engineering staff from the other cities, so.
And I don't think this says that we're going to exclude or we're going to ignore other parts of the county. We just know that for some of these issues that are going to arise inevitably and are here, they're not going to arise, they have arisen. Things like workforce, childcare, transit, housing, all of those things, and the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support those, that has to be a priority for the county. So I think that's what's recognized here, not to say that other parts of the county need no focus whatsoever. Commissioner Haslett?
Yes, and I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate the discussion that we want to make it clear that this priority isn't just for the northwest portion of the Johnson County. So I might suggest in that second part of that impact statement, while creating an area development plan, to add, while creating an area development plan for the county, that will include not only, that way I think it makes it a little more clear that it's for the county.
If you don't mind, I'd like to weigh in. And if that's what the will of the board is, then we'll do it. Because as what's stated already, we are doing those things. The reason why in the impact statement, we took the broader statement above it that is more encompassing and then focused more on the impact statement over the next 2 years on the northwest area. That is such a much larger magnitude of impact. I mean, it's very impactful for the rest of the county as well, but this is bringing in, state impacts, regional impacts. So we were putting forward, this is where a lot more staff focus beyond maybe what a typical development area plan would entail. We would still continue. So we were reflecting what I thought I heard at the retreat was more focus on the newer, more time-consuming one. However, if the board chooses to do both, I mean, we're still going to do them whether it's highlighted here or not. We were trying to get some focus area above what we're already doing.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate that, and I withdraw my suggestion.
Clarification.
Commissioner O'Hara, then we'll come back for clarification.
Thank you. I had a question for Jay and then a comment. We've already sent, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we have sent $30 million out to the DeSoto area, one for the fire station. I think that was 15 million, then 15 million for the roads.
Total of 15, 7.5 for each.
7.5, okay, thank you. But we have already sent out $15 million to this area. I think because
You
we are-
allocated, I don't think it's been given yet, but you've allocated.
We have allocated $15 million. And the reason being is that DeSoto has made a decision to give a tax increment finance district to Panasonic, and that does really cut back on their property tax revenues. So I would suggest that we identify needs, seek partnerships to deliver initiatives for the rapidly developing portions of Johnson County and take out the Northwest, so that it doesn't look like that we are just focusing on one part of the county. And like I said, we've already allocated $15 million, and how much is enough? And we'll be cooperating with DeSoto on CARS money. And the other thing, I did have a question for Jay. May I ask Jay a question?
Jay Leipzig.
Yes. So Jay, your comment almost made it sound like that the broadband and other infrastructure would be part of the overall development comprehensive plan as a requirement for development. I just wanted clarification on that.
I wouldn't say it's absolutely required. I think it might vary but I think you certainly would want to look at those type of components typically to ensure there's broadband access. And that's in addition to your traditional land use type of.
So you're thinking about within our comprehensive plan and through our development plans that if a person comes in and they have, well, like today, that 133 acres that we had 4 parcels, that it possibly could be that broadband would be part of that requirement?
No, not necessarily part of that requirement. I think it's going to vary on the plat level that we saw today, probably not. But I think it's good to at least to start to, I think it would behoove us to review some of that information on an area-wide basis, just to see what way that, or different ways we may be able to provide that type of access. It may not be on the individual plat or the application, but overall, it's something we should certainly consider.
So you're thinking like if you have a large lot development, maybe there's 40 lots, that you're going to consider requiring the developer to put in the broadband so that when it's available or something?
I wouldn't say it's that specific. Certainly in a comprehensive plan, you wouldn't want it to be that specific. I just think it's something that you you would hopefully try to either, you know, if there's right of way that could be dedicated for something like that up front, but I wouldn't say you would want to require it at every time. I think
But we have utility easements required already.
Correct.
So this would be an additional expense, and we're working on trying to hold down the cost of housing. But anyway, I have a problem with that. Obviously, broadband is a huge issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanslick.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm glad to make a motion that we direct staff to move forward with the BOCC priorities on infrastructure.
Go ahead.
I will second that.
Okay. Commissioner Ashcraft, you wanted a clarification.
Yes, and it may be somewhat akin to what Commissioner O'Hara was asking. Back to the CARS program, there's a process that communities go through to extract those funds for various road improvements. If we support this, are we basically saying that, in this case, CARS funding would get a higher valuation or higher priority in terms of use than what the other communities might ask? Or will that be treated separately somehow in opposition or in deference to these priorities that we're adopting?
Well, the CARS program it's a policy that you guys have adopted. And there's certain criteria that they look at. So we're not saying this priority changes that policy.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Commissioner Allen Brand.
Point of clarification, so this does not affect the CARS money. It does not affect the money out in the unincorporated area. This is not stating that we're giving any more money to DeSoto. It is saying, to me, it's pretty laid out here what we're saying. A lot of the things we're talking about is already being done.
I would say
And
yes.
broadband, there's state and federal funding, and several of us been working on that in the unincorporated area and getting that put into place.
Oh, I have a clarification for Commissioner Ashcraft.
Oh, sorry.
Also on CARS, but also in response to what you said. Doing this is just saying we're going to be working on the planning side of it. We're going to bring all the affected parties together. We're going to be looking at these types of things so that you're clear that we plan to step up efforts here. We've kind of heard from the board in various settings. That's what you want us to do. So it's really planning purposes, but if there's policy questions that come out of that work, this body will see that again. And I wanted to go back to Commissioner Ashcraft on CARS. The criteria in CARS has to do with impacts and a number of things. So whether we do this priority or not, probably some of the things in these developing areas are going to have extra consideration based on the criteria that's already established.
And I think that'll just come from necessity. And so again, we're not allocating funds by putting these priorities forward. We're not adhering to any particular projects or making agreements here, but instead recognizing the needs and therefore prioritizing focus moving forward and giving staff some direction for what policies to bring forward and what to be cognizant of within our existing programs. But again, those will still be performed based on the language of the resolutions or ordinances that are required.
I would add one thing to that, in that if the board is saying, yes, this is one of the priorities for staff to focus, it also is, when we're looking at putting the full budget together, that's a consideration. It's not the only one, but it's in combination with the direction that you give us at the budget retreat. It's also, it's not the only thing. It's looking at the community survey and what the community says. So it is something that we factor in when we bring recommendations to you at a very high level. But again, policy choices will be up to the board as they come forward.
Commissioner O'Hara?
Thank you. Jay, area development plan, that is different than the comprehensive plan?
Yes, Commissioner Jay Leipzig, that's the thought, that area development plans really focus on, it's a subset of the comprehensive plan.
So this would be something new that's going to be impacting the development of the
I would
rural
say new,
areas.
yes, although we've done similar type things before. I think of the Stillwell area plan, but something along similar to that.
Okay, because I'm not clear on that, And I can see where this could have a real impact on rural development, because it's not clear as to what you're going to talk about as far as transportation, transit, and infrastructure as far as to a land use plan. I just think that that's way too open-ended, and I would suggest that we just make this very simple. Identify needs and seek partnerships to deliver initiatives for the rapidly developing portions of Johnson County, period. We're going to be doing some of these other things anyway, and I just don't want to put out there in policy that we're going to put more burdens on the development community.
Again, this is priorities, not policies, but I think, to be fair, this is a need for the rural part of our community. This growth is coming regardless of the prioritization that we set here. And I think it's incumbent upon us to lead forward and make sure that we help usher in infrastructure that's going to support our rural residents, and therefore making sure that we are intentional about transportation, transit, broadband infrastructure, and plan accordingly is the way that we can best serve them. And as far as the amounts of money that's been discussed here, we're part of a broad coalition, a bipartisan coalition supporting this really catalytic development that will absolutely change the face of parts of Johnson County, I think for the better, but it's important upon us to be intentional about it. And so I'm glad we're doing so with this, and I appreciate Commissioner Hanslick's motion. I'll ask that we call the question on that. If there's
I
a
have an
second.
amendment.
If there's a second for the call of the question.
I already seconded it.
Oh, I just called the question. Did
Oh,
you
I'm
second it?
sorry, second.
Okay, it's the clerk to take the roll.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Isn't it required that amendments are, that we have an opportunity to add an amendment to a motion on the floor?
Not after the question's been called, no. I'd ask the clerk to take the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
No.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
No.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Kelly.
I have 5 votes in favor and 2 votes against. Is that consistent with your count?
That's correct.
All right, let's move on to number 3, staff.
Staff, and Joe Waters is going to lead this one. Joe?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Joe Waters, Assistant County Manager. So we had a good group, a large group that worked this. Of course, Human Resources and FMA were both very involved, being the ones responsible for benefits and salaries and all things human resources. But Parks and Recreation, Mental Health, JCW, Corrections, and Developmental Supports. So some departments with a lot of staff doing a wide variety of work. This was, the board titled this staff. We felt the best description of that would get to the point that was consistent with the parts and pieces that the board arrived at in coming up with the areas of concentration, read as such: invest in and support a forward-thinking, diverse, and high-performing workforce. The impact statement then that goes along with that. So, what's the point? What's the impact of placing the attention and the priority of the Board of County Commissioners on staff? Would be that we would have a resilient workforce that maximizes the county's ability to deliver exceptional services, contributing to a high quality of life for Johnson County residents. What goes with that, what comes from that, are a long list of action items, things around reinforcing our total compensation philosophy, which means we're monitoring, we're surveying, we are managing our benefits and our salaries consistent with the board's policy in that regard, that we work diligently towards recruitment and retention strategies, looking at best practices, being proactive, reaching parts of the community that maybe we have not been as effective in reaching in the past, and working for the long term, getting to the schools, making contacts there, and a variety of other areas, streamlining our systems so that it's easier and to apply for positions within the county, and streamlining workplace practices so we only hire as many people as we need and people with the right skills that we need. So,
Joe, I do want to say one thing for clarification, because we did say these are priorities and not policy setting. So if you adopt this, we're not saying that you have to approve the compensation policy as presented. I just wanted to clarify, that's a policy question that's separate from this. Obviously, you know, it could be a part of the discussion as it relates to how you want to approach that recommendation. But I just wanted to clarify, to back up what was said earlier, that this is a priority focus. Policy questions come separate to you in a different setting.
Thank you very much, Penny, and thank you, Joe.
yep. I may have gotten out a little bit ahead there on our excitement about the different actions that we are.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know one of the things that makes our county strong is the team here. And again, you've got allies here on the board, staff, and I speak to staff, not just you four, but to the greater staff, because we recognize that we're in the public service industry, and the value that we have to our residents is the staff. And so, especially in a very weird economy that we're having right now, and in a workforce crisis we are not immune to, I think making sure that we have this high-performing workforce that remains innovative is a way that we can best serve our residents, and frankly, the primary way that we can best serve our residents. So I'm glad this is a priority. Open up for questions and comments. Commissioner Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Chairman, I agree that staff should be a priority. What I am struggling with is over the last several years when the commission has done priorities, the concept of efficiency has always been interjected, and I do not see that here because that troubles me. The value proposition should be core to what and how we do our work. It might be loosely implied here, but it is not fundamental to the work we do and how we represent our work. And I use the pillars of performance as an example. The word efficiency is not even in the pillars of performance, and we've missed that in terms of the discussions we have over and over again. And I know that casually we talk about it, but it's not fundamental. And that's what challenges me on all of these priorities, but especially this one.
Ms. Postock?
Yes, I would say as part of the high-performance organization, absolutely, we focus on efficiency and effectiveness. We
It's not
do
mentioned
focus on it,
once,
and it does
the
say
pillars of
here,
performance.
high-performing workforce, and I think that it's implied. I have no problem if the board thinks that we need to insert it here. It's another thing that the chairman brought up earlier. There's a lot of values that we could list, and certainly if you want to highlight that one, I am not opposed to it at all.
Thank you. Commissioner Ashcraft, I use the word efficiency a lot. I know you do too. My fear with adding it as it relates to staff is that we may be sending the message that we want to limit staff by saying we want an efficient staff. And then now, word choice is what it is. But I think the idea of efficiency, of utilizing the resources that are given in an expedient manner, and being cognizant of the use of those resources, to me, is encompassed within high performing, but I understand if others might feel differently. Commissioner Hanslick?
Yes, thank you. No, I think this is a good statement, and I especially appreciate the section that says a resilient workforce that maximizes the county's ability to deliver exceptional services, because there can be different ways of doing that. There can be different ways of maximizing the county's ability to deliver exceptional services. And I agree with the chair that wording, I think, more effectively conveys at least what my meaning would be, than the word efficient. I think efficient is more a measurement of outcomes, and what we're talking about here are the priorities. So I'm glad to move that we ask the staff to move forward, or we direct the staff to move forward with the BOCC 2023-2024 priorities for staff as written. Is there a second?
I'll second that, and with continued discussion.
I have an amendment.
Commissioner O'Hara?
I suggest that instead of workforce, that we use the word employees. I think that it's more respectful to the individuals. So I will read what I suggest as an amendment, or I guess this would be a substitute motion. Invest in and support a forward-thinking, diverse, high-performing, and efficient employees. Impact statement: resilient employees that maximizes the county's ability to deliver exceptional, efficient services, contributing to a high quality of life for the Johnson County residents.
Moved by Commissioner O'Hara, seconded by Commissioner Ashcraft. I see the nod. I like the original statement better. I don't think workforce is an offensive term, and it's a common term utilized within, I think, every industry. And for the reasons previously stated, I don't think we need to put in efficient twice. Commissioner Allenbrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Even though I understand what Commissioner O'Hara is trying to say, the industry as a whole looks at workforce. I mean, that's a national term, and it doesn't always mean, to say employee, that even to me is almost more, we're just playing on words. And so I'm not bothered if efficiency needs to be in there, but I feel like it's already being said. So, I don't know.
I'm not seeing further comments, so I'll call the vote on the motion to substitute. Not on approving one motion or the other, but on the motion to substitute.
Now, that's Commissioner O'Hara's,
That's my
right? Okay.
motion.
So,
Again.
so
Sure.
the question here, just to make sure everybody understands, is we're asking to substitute. We're not approving Commissioner O'Hara's motion. We're voting on whether or not to substitute it into the place for the motion on the table. All right?
Okay.
But if you'd like to read it again, please read it
Sure,
again.
yes.
Thank you. Invest in and support a forward-thinking, diverse, high-performing, and efficient, I need another word in there, efficient individual employees. Impact statement: resilient employees that maximize the county's ability to deliver exceptional and efficient services, contributing to a high quality of life for Johnson County residents. Workforce sounds like there's an ownership. Employees, it's like you're focusing more on the individuals and their success within the organization. That's what I'm trying to put forth here. And we're always talking about value of individuals.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take the vote on the motion to substitute now.
Commissioner Fast.
No.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, no.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, no.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, no.
And Chairman Kelly.
No, I have 2 votes in favor and 5 against. Is that consistent with your count?
That's correct.
I'm back to the motion as originally presented by Commissioner Hanslick. I'll ask the clerk call a roll on that motion.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
No.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
No.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Kelly.
Aye, 5 votes in favor and 2 against. Is that consistent with your count?
That's correct.
All right, and finally on to health and safety.
Okay, this is the 4th one that came out of the retreat, and Julie's going to cover this one.
Thank you. So coming out of the retreat, this item probably had the least amount of specificity. So this is our attempt to bridge the discussion we heard at the retreat. The overall statement would be that Johnson County strives to provide a high quality of life for all residents, which includes a safe and healthy community. It's really trying to acknowledge at the heart of everything we do in county government is in support of health and safety. The impact statement, again, more specific to the short term, as we continue to make health and safety a priority, we will do so through the lens of sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion to promote a healthier environment and create a sense of belonging/connection throughout Johnson County. This will be accomplished by considering sustainability and inclusiveness when making funding and policy recommendations decisions.
All right, thank you very much. And I appreciate that this was a broader goal than some of the others may have been, but I think it's important, as we have seen in our community survey, as well as when we speak to residents, health and safety continues to be a priority, and that includes not just physical health. And so I appreciate the staff's really well-reasoned impact statement and priority to put that goal into place, or this priority into place. And again, not establishing policy, but recognizing this is a priority. And as we continue to grow, being able to hear from experts in the field, which I think will be helpful for us, whether it be with regards to sustainability or inclusiveness, I think would be well served in hearing those multitude of voices. Let me open it up for questions. Commissioner Hanslick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate how challenging this one was, and I think you've done a great job of reflecting that conversation. And as it was being read, I was thinking of a couple of examples of how we have already been fulfilling this or making this a priority. I'm thinking of our involvement in the Communities for All Ages. That is health and safety. Our involvement with the Climate Action Plan, that's definitely health and safety. And many other things that we've done, but I think this is saying we want to continue to do those things moving forward. So I don't have any suggested changes. I think it looks good.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Okay. Well, whenever you put in diversity, equity, and inclusion, my experience has been division, exclusion, and inequality. Because as I stated in the retreat, that it appears that the diversity that I bring, in my opinion, that is not considered diversity, and that only diversity is whatever fits within the current narrative of the majority of the board. But I just had some questions on this. On Roland Park, because we're supposed to be looking through the lens of DEI. And so in Roland Park, they have a whole list of questions on a guide of racial equity impact questions, and I'm just wondering if this is where we're heading. I'll just read them real quickly. What is the intended outcome of this item? Does this item benefit all racial groups? Does this item leave out any racial groups? What, if any, social determinants of health are impacted by this item? What, if any, are the unintended economic and environmental impacts of this item? How has the impacted community been involved, and how will the program be communicated to all stakeholders? I mean, is this the direction that we're heading? And this will be through the lens of the DEI that we are looking at. I mean, obviously, this is following that what Chairman Kelly had started in Roland Park, and it's the fruition of that. And I'm just wondering if this is the direction that we're heading.
So let me take that, since I was brought up there. These questions that you speak of was after my time in Roland Park, but I was there when we started the Racial Equity Committee, which has been a real value And what it has done is allowed an opportunity for folks who traditionally were and continue to be hesitant to come forward and be part of the community, allow them a forum in which they can identify the ways in which our actions are impacting already and traditionally marginalized groups. It doesn't mean diversity of thought. It means groups that have been traditionally marginalized. And I'm not advocating, and I've had discussions with several commissioners on this dais. I'm not, and while I understand the focus of putting something on the briefing sheets is not exactly what I'm looking for, and as you know, we thought about this, my thinking has evolved that we need to be hearing from others in our community when we're talking about this, not just staff, but experts in the field, those who have talents and treasures within our community, and give an opportunity to unlock that through listening to folks that have different lived experiences than the majority of us traditionally have. And you know, Johnson County comes from a place that suffers the scars of redlining, for example. And so being able to hear about the impacts of that, and if you haven't been to King Louis and seen that exhibit yet, you definitely should go see that. So being able to learn from that and make better decisions, that's going to be allowing us to unlock that talent and treasure that's already within our community, as I think what's encompassed here. And I'm sorry for the monologue, Ms. Postoke Ferguson, but if you wanted to address that as well, or if anybody on the panel would. That's
Mr.
fine.
Allenbrand has her hand up, and we'd be
I have my
happy to
finger up.
expand.
I'm so sorry.
I'm
Commissioner
sorry, Mr.
Allenbrand.
Chair. I just want to say, I don't think the chair has that much power to tell us what we decide on at our staff retreat, or whatever our retreat was. It was a retreat, board retreat, which I value very highly because I was able to hear from the survey and able to hear from what the staff needs are. And that's how we put this into place. I looked up diversity, and diversity can mean a lot of things. And so, you know, this was something that several of us here, you know, we put it on our priority list, and so that's why it's here. And so when you're ready, Mr. Chair, I can make a motion.
You're welcome to.
I move that we adopt the BOCC 2023-2024 priorities, health and safety as written.
Point of order, I think we've been told it needs to say.
You know what, I'm going to let you make the motion, and I'll second it, so
Move
you
to-
go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
move
and
to
I'll
direct
second-
staff to move forward with the health and safety
And
priority
I'll
as
second
written.
that.
Okay. Continued discussion on this item,
Chairman, can I respond? I was waiting till after her.
please.
Okay, so this is intended to capture the focus area, and so the next step, if this gets approved either as written or with amendments, the next step is really to work on the action steps. But we didn't want to go too far on the action steps, so we knew that this is a priority as laid out.
Thank you. Commissioner Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some clarifying questions, first of all. The last sentence, this will be accomplished by considering sustainability and inclusiveness when making funding and policy. So inclusiveness in that context, what are we trying to communicate there?
Okay. Well, what we said above was diversity, equity, and inclusion. So along those lines, it was just trying to summarize it by what's above. And that sentence itself, the way I see that is if staff is bringing forward an item for your consideration separate from this priority, and it's justified in its own merit, but then if they are also able to say, not every item will have this, but if they're also able to say, and there's an impact on one of these areas by doing this item, then it may give you extra consideration or some additional information as you make that policy choice, was the intent of that sentence. But Julie did work on the details of this, and so she'll probably have more information than me.
Thank you, Commissioner. We were trying to take the spirit of what was said at the retreat, which is through the lens of, and that was what we were trying to interpret. It didn't necessarily mean new programs, but that the decisions that we are already making as a community would give extra thought to the inclusiveness and sustainability. So on the action items, we did talk specifically about things like, briefing sheets that the chair mentioned, but also we had a lot of discussions about how communication is involved in this and making sure that we're communicating our existing programs to all aspects of our community and making sure that we're really reaching and having the impact. So it's through the lens of is where we were really focused on, taking what we're already doing and making sure that we're doing so with those things in mind.
Well, and again, there's no reference to any kind of cost-benefit analysis efficiency. That value is not, included here, which troubles me a little bit. I think, though, that really what gives me the greatest pause is the phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's become such a common trope now, and a lot of connotations associated with it. And I was just wondering if we couldn't focus more on the outcome intended and the outcomes intended along the lines of equality, merit, and colorblindness, because the concept individually are fine, but because of its common vernacular and the general arguments it generates, I think it confuses whatever the intent might be here.
Is that an amendment?
Yes.
I second it.
All right, so, and I appreciate that there's been political connotations provided around these terms. I don't think they're in good faith, though. And while that may not mean that they're not real, I think it's important in these terms have merit in their inclusion herein. Particularly, let's talk about equity. Equity is different than equality. It is not saying that every particular need is met with the same output or the same input. And so to best meet the needs of our community, we need to be looking and intentional about what are the needs primarily to those that are most vulnerable, and then allocating the need accordingly, or the resource accordingly, and then listening to hear what those needs really are, as opposed to just assuming that everything is all equal and therefore we can not worry about hearing those specifics. So anyway, we can get too deep into it, but I don't think that I think disingenuous arguments of some politicians to deter us from using the term that's used by other communities here in Johnson County, as well as leading experts in the field. Commissioner Hanslick, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to give an example. Recently was talking to, I'm sorry, but I'm going to call you Mr. Tony. I think I'm stuck with that. In terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, we were talking about signage for this building. And how can we make sure that when people come to this building, no matter if they have a physical disability, an intellectual disability, a hearing or sight disability, that they can independently, to the extent possible, find their way to wherever they need to go without having to depend on other people. And to me, that's an example of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're making sure that everybody can be as independent as possible and make decisions that allow that to happen in all of our decisions. And that's going to look different in different policies and different programs, but it doesn't have to be a controversial concept. That's what it's about, is making sure that everybody, that we're thinking about those needs and what can we do to ensure that everybody can walk in this building and find their way to where they need to go without having to ask somebody in the hallway to help them.
Ms. Postock Ferguson.
I think some of your words may have some unintended consequences, and I'll use color blindness because I'm one of the few in this room that is of color, and it's hurtful. I'll be honest. I don't think you intended to, but I think there's unintended consequences because when someone values me, I want them to value my whole self. And if you say you don't see that side of me, it has unintended consequences. I'm certain that you didn't mean to, but I just wanted to raise that for those that aren't here to speak to it.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen Brand.
Mr. Chair, one more thing. If you look up the definition, basically it says it's an organizational framework that seeks to promote fair treatment and full participation from all people. So it's basically identifying those people, making sure that everyone is treated fairly. I know I have some handicaps from an accident that I was in, and sometimes people look at it, well, why is your arm a different size? So, people look at people, and you have to, that's also fairness. So I think that if you look at the definition, it covers all those things, so.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I take umbrage with your earlier statement. My comment was offered in good faith, and while I may be a politician of some ill repute, I would say that the intent is to try to move us away from those frameworks that antagonize people. And I appreciate Ms. Postock Ferguson pointing that out. The concept of colorblindness is not to judge someone based on their color or anything else, and that's the sole intent. And when you look at equality versus equity, equality, by the definition that I found, means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. That, I think, goes to the core issue of merit, and we should be judging on merit rather than getting tied up in these tropes. And when you're dealing with race and racial issues, there are lots of definitions, and I think the focus should be on merit and giving everyone the same opportunity, and based on their merit, allow them to succeed to the extent that they can.
Thank you, Commissioner Ashcraft. And umbrage received, and my comment about the disingenuous criticism of DEI was not directed at you, and I apologize if you took it that way. It wasn't intended that way, but you can only accept my apologies for how it landed.
I accept.
Now, thank you. Now, to your last point on merit, I think by not everybody has the same opportunities, and we can't just automatically assume that everybody has the same opportunities, and the whole point is recognizing that, and therefore trying to do better and bend that arc towards justice. And I'm sorry, too late in the day to properly quote a great man, but over time we can recognize that and allocate accordingly. Or, as to Commissioner Hansick's point, recognizing that some people have different needs, and that's not merit-based. It's based on characteristics that they had no control over whatsoever. And so I don't, again, I think the terms as originally presented is preferable to me. Commissioner O'Hara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally support the amendment that is on the floor, and I wish to call that a question on that amendment.
Okay. Ask clerk to call the roll.
I don't know what we're voting on.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Fast is out. You want to wait?
No.
I don't know.
So are we voting on an amendment that's,
So the amendment was to change the phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion to
okay.
colorblindness. I'm sorry, what was the phrase, Commissioner
Okay.
Ashcraft?
equality, merit, and colorblindness.
Okay, so
Commissioner Fast is absent. Commissioner Myers.
Myers, no.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes,
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, no?
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, no.
And Chairman Kelly.
no, 2 votes in favor, 4 against, motion, amendment fails. Back to the motion at hand. I'd ask the clerk to call the question.
Commissioner Fast is absent. Commissioner Myers.
Myers, yes.
Commissioner O'Hara. Commissioner O'Hara.
no.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
No.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Kelly.
Aye. 4 votes in favor, 2 votes against. Is that consistent with your count?
That's correct.
Okay. The last slide is discussion direction for staff. Was there anything in particular you wanted to discuss there, Ms. Postoke Ferguson?
I think we have our direction.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you very much to the entire staff who helped us wordsmith those. I know that can sometimes be the most difficult part of leadership is wordsmithing. So with that, let's take a quick break, maybe just 4 minutes before we start with the infiltration and inflow removal program.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to say that I'm going to apologize in advance. I need to get to the library board meeting, so I will be leaving. That starts at 4, and I hope to see you all there at 6 then for our joint meeting.
We'll see you this evening, so noted. Thank you, Commissioner Hanslick. Well, the time is 3:29. Let's be back at 3:35. Thank you.
We have enough, do we need to vote on?
But we'll be there if we're out early enough.
Yeah, let's, hopefully.
Chair, we should be ready.
Very good. We are back here for the continuation of this committee of the whole, this time with the team from Johnson County Wastewater, Susan Pekarik, Aaron Witt, and Troy Young, regarding the private infiltration and inflow removal program. It's great to see Aaron Witt yesterday at the County Day, and thanks for your participation and leadership. I appreciate that. I guess I'll turn it over at this point to Susan Pekarik.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman. Appreciate it. Susan Pekarik with Wastewater. I know in the interest of time, we're going to try to roll through this pretty quickly, but I would like to take a minute to do a few introductions because I'm not sure if everyone on the board is aware of the expertise that we actually have right here at Johnson County Government when it comes to private I&I programs. And so I'd actually like to start with the three gentlemen behind me. In the middle, you probably recognize Patrick Dunning. He's our Assistant Chief Engineer for Existing Infrastructure. And it will be Patrick's team that's leading the execution of the program relaunch or update that we're going to talk to you about today. Patrick's also leading the Nelson Improvements Project as well. On Patrick's left, so you're right, is Ron Thoman from Trek Engineering. Ron actually worked at Johnson County Wastewater and was involved in the development of the private I&I program back in the 80s and the 90s. He's a national expert, so we're excited to have him engaged in the program at this time. And then on Patrick's right, your left, we have Ryan Eisel, and Ryan is from HDR. He is the lead on our integrated planning program management and works with Assistant Chief Engineer Tammy Lorenzen. Here at the table, I have Troy Young. Troy's been with the county for 29 years, and he's been a part of or leading the program for over 25 years. So Troy's credentials include he is a recipient of a Golden Manhole Award from Kansas Water Environment Association for his leadership and contributions in programs like the private I&I removal efforts. And then Aaron Witt, Chief Engineer. You all know him. I'm going to go ahead. 23 years here pretty soon, is that right, with the county? 24 years with the county, so really pleased that he's here. Aaron was vice chair and actually one of the authors of Water Environment Federation's private property infiltration and inflow publication that was put out back in 2016. So we have, as I said, we're blessed to have a number of experts in private property I&I removal. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to get us started.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Today we'll talk through the background and history, the rebranding of the private I&I removal program and our new approach, the program benefits and the process overview, as well as our schedule and next steps. To give you a general definition of infiltration and inflow, or you will hear us refer to this as I&I a lot this afternoon. Infiltration is groundwater that's seeping into the system through defects, like in manholes or pipes, such as cracks or open joints. And since groundwater levels affect infiltration, sometimes it can last for days or weeks following rainfall events or the wet season. Inflow is rainwater that's entering the system through direct connections, such as downspouts or yard or foundation drains. In the public system, sometimes there's a cross connection between the storm drain and our sanitary sewers. But inflow occurs in direct relation to the intensity of a storm, so it happens quickly during these rain events. So the large, intense storm events can cause problems in our system. Private I&I is the wet weather flow that enters the system through defects or sources on private property. So we own and maintain the main sewer lines and manholes, and then from the service connection that connects into our main line back is considered private property. The program we're discussing today is the removal of these wet weather sources from private property. In the mid-'80s and '90s, the county made a major commitment to system improvements that included an innovative private I&I removal program. We removed over 16,000 sources of private I&I and reduced I&I by more than 40%. And this was the first large-scale program of this type and made JCW an industry leader. And again, Ron Thoman and Troy were part of that program. In the graph in the table, you can see the number of backups that were occurring in the system back in the 80s and the success we've had over the years in reducing these occurrences. I would also note that during this time frame, we've more than doubled the amount or the size of our system. And this was achieved through the support of the board with increasing our proactive maintenance. So when we clean the lines and clean out the roots and debris, so it frees up that capacity when we do get that wet weather. Also the I&I removal we'll talk about. Capital investment in capacity, such as increasing pipe size, as well as our backup prevention program. Despite our successes over the years, I&I continues to be a challenge. Excess I&Is we've talked about can cause backups into homes as well as sewer overflows into the streams, not to mention the additional costs of treatment for that flow. Manholes and pipes continue to age, and this is the public portion of our system, and we're addressing that public portion I&I removal through our asset management program with manhole and pipeline rehabilitation. And then we still have private sources in our system. We completed a pilot I&I project in response to an EPA request regarding wet weather overflows and discharges from our system, and it was really in our Nelson service area or the northeast part of the county. The pilot project addressed both public and private I&I sources. We tested various methods of removal to determine the most cost-effective approach, and then the data from this project is still being used in what we're doing today. So this graph just demonstrates the type of analysis that is completed to look at the cost of transport and treatment at different levels of I&I removal, along with the cost to achieve the different levels of I&I removal. So you can see the costs on the y-axis, and then across the x-axis, there's just different degrees of I&I removal, and we can run those costs. But generally, as we're removing flow from the system, it costs less to transport and treat that flow. But the purple line you see is our I&I removal. So the more that we find and remove, the more that costs for that particular piece. We can add those costs up, and you see the red curve, and we come up with an ideal solution for the low overall cost for an area. In this particular case, it was 30% removal is where we came up with. Really what that does is identify the types of sources that are cost effective for us to go out and find and remove, and Troy will talk more about that in a minute. Our optimization modeling efforts have greatly reduced our planned costs for improvements in our system. We've projected hundreds of millions of dollars in savings over previous plans that were developed. We've completed these studies in multiple service areas of our system, and the area shown here is the Nelson service area. Our I&I removal efforts are part of those plans and direct us to areas that provide the most benefits to achieve flow reductions in the system. And again, our asset management program will address I&I in the public portion of the system. But you can see the darker hatched areas, and this is in the Nelson service area, so the Mission Main, and there's also some in the green area, the Turkey Creek watershed. Those are areas that from the analysis say that we should go in and focus that private I&I removal effort, and we'll talk more of that in a minute. You're familiar with this slide. As we talk about our integrated plan, we just wanted to point out that the I&I removal efforts are included as an important part of this long-term strategic plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Troy to talk through the new program and approach.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, with the rebooting of the program, this was a perfect time for us to brand the program, move away from the
Microphone on.
Sorry, I may just need to move a little closer. Is that better? Sorry about that. With the rebooting of the program, this is a perfect opportunity for us to brand the program, come up with a name, a catchier name to address the private I&I issues. Our program is voluntary, so a resident can opt out at any point during the program. It's a zero out-of-pocket expense for the resident. JCW covers the cost of the removal. It's a cost-effective approach to improve system performance during wet weather. It reduces the risk of backups, reduces the risk of sanitary sewer overflows, which also improves water quality. Customer engagement, with this program, we have the opportunity to reach out to residents and invite them to be a part of the solution. Residents who participate in the program will help JCW achieve its 25-year goal to help with water quality while maintaining affordable rates. Sorry about that. Right now, I will briefly walk you through the process and steps of the program and its various phases. Communication with the residents. Positive communication with the residents is vitally important to the success of this program. We plan on having open houses and public information meetings. The open houses will be in our targeted areas, where we'll convey the details of the program to better inform the public, and it gives the public a chance or an opportunity to ask us questions as well. We developed a program website, which will provide details, provide frequently asked questions, allow residents to contact the team and schedule appointments through the website. The board has already approved the implementation of a new web portal that will allow us to the project team to communicate with residents via text messages, email, phone, and the old-fashioned US mail. We'll also use other methods of outreach like social media, county publications, websites, and also letters and door hangers. We plan on focusing the program in targeted areas that are in need of wet weather flow reduction. All buildings located within the area are eligible for the program. When an appointment has been scheduled and a team member is on site at the resident's property, we'll be looking inside and outside the property. On the inside, we're looking for foundation drains, directly connected sump pumps. We're also noting leaky foundations, which allows us to quantify flows in the system. On the exterior of the home, as we walk around, we're looking for things like driveway drains, area drains, downspouts, stairwell drains, and just other notable sources of groundwater into the sanitary sewer system. While they're there, if a source is found, the qualifying property owner will be allowed to select a plumbing contractor to perform the work, or they can defer the plumber selection to the program coordinator. It should be noted right now that we are actually in the RFP process of selecting qualified plumbing contractors. When the work is completed, the plumbing company when the work is completed by the plumbing company, the final inspection is scheduled, and we confirm that the approved work that JCW is paying for was completed and the property owner is satisfied with the work. Most of the payments are paid directly to the plumbing contractors, but we do offer the option to reimburse the property owner if desired. Property owner satisfaction is critical to the success of the program. We want participants to also help promote the program. So when the resident has completed all the steps in the program, they'll be sent a short survey. We use on planning these responses to make changes and improve the program. As I said, key points here, public outreach and resident engagement is a key to success for this program. We plan on using a one-team approach, so the JCW project team, the plumbers and residents are all key. Quality and responsiveness, we want quality work for the residents' homes and the work to be done in a timely manner. We're working with a customer-first approach, basically being aware of the residents' time and engagement with JCW's program. One of the big drivers here is we wanted to simplify the process. Part of this is using methods like the web portal I spoke about earlier, which allows for multiple methods of communication and scheduling, including being a very mobile-friendly method. Another great thing about this is we're going paperless with agreements and notifications. And one of the things we really talked about was responsiveness from evaluation to remediation, is we really want to be mindful of everyone's time. That's the staff, plumbers, and residents. So we really wanted to minimize any inconvenience to the property owner. I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
Thanks, Troy. JOCO Inflow puts our team in a position to work together with the residents to reduce I&I and meet the goals of our integrated plan. We've developed a strategy and tools for the program as shown in the green on the slide. Our next step in yellow will be to partner with the community and implement the program. And then as the program progresses, our team will be measuring progress and confirming success of our investments by conducting flow monitoring in the system. This provides an opportunity for our team to adapt the program to maximize value to the community. So again, ultimately helping us achieve our goal with successful implementation of our integrated plan. Just to touch on the schedule, in the coming year, our next step will be to come to you to request funding and consider contract award to the plumbers. Plumber education, after that, plumber education on the program along with the software and how to use that will start to occur, along with our customer outreach and notification. And then we plan to do a soft start on a smaller area so we can incorporate our lessons learned before we go to the larger program towards the end of the year. Like I said, we'll be coming to you in May to request funding for the program, and then also award of the contract to plumbers through the RFP process. We do plan on awarding that to multiple contractors. And just as a reminder, this is part of our capital plan. It was included in the rate model we presented in May of last year, and it is included in our fiscal year '23 budget. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witt. Open for questions. Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because I have to ask, Mr. Young, is this your first time before us? Okay, I couldn't remember, but sometimes the whiskers throw me off. Very good. Well, welcome. Mr. Witt, will your presentation provide a return on investment analysis in terms of the cost savings of implementing this program and the impact on system costs and development?
Excuse me. You're asking if we'll present that when we come to you next month?
Yes.
Yes, we can talk to that, and I can show you an example just from.
No, I understand the concept, and I want the program to be successful, but the argument is, and I always like to use the example, why did electric utilities give you breaks on buying new appliances? Because if you bought more cost-effective, energy-effective appliances, they wouldn't have to build bigger power stations. And it's the same concept here, but I just want to make sure you've done the analysis and can present that argument.
Yes, we can talk to that.
Thank you.
You got to build to the peak, right? Commissioner Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question. The majority of these areas in the northeast Johnson County, that's what I was thinking with all the tree growth, and makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner O'Hara.
I'm assuming that construction before 1995, that's where you're finding a lot of the floor drains and the foundation drains attached to the drain to the sewers, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
I think that it's great that the county is taking this on and that we are absorbing the cost. Obviously, people are not going to volunteer to improve their property if they're going to have to shoulder the cost. And because I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that when this first came out, we were using smoke or something to find some of the, so
Yes.
people's basements would be filled with smoke. So we're beyond that phase, I'm assuming.
It's still used sometimes. We're not planning to use it as part of this program. If we find a source, we can dye test it and see if it comes out in the
Okay,
signatures.
thank you.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I have to say something. I totally 100% agree with you, but I would have called you on the question about the smoke, because that just seems a little weird to me.
No, it's true.
It is.
Great job.
Well, and thank you from those residents in the Northeast that may be struggling and allowing the county to be a partner in improving their homes. Not only improves their quality of life, but the quality of life of the surrounding community. Plus, at the end of the day, it's going to save taxpayer resources. So I appreciate that we're making that investment and providing that service that some might say is non-essential, but I think we can definitely make the argument for it.
Definitely.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Well, I will argue the point that this actually is efficient for the county because having this excess water in the system is extremely costly.
Oh, I agree with that.
Agree.
Yeah. Got to look beyond the initial cost sometimes. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing this back before the board and in May or whenever we may darken your doors again. But until then, keep up the great work, and let me, again, congratulate Wastewater on their capstone award this evening. I know we're keeping you from that, but congratulations very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we do appreciate the recognition at State of County and elsewhere. So thank you so much for thinking of us. We appreciate it. It's a great team here.
Without a doubt. With that, this committee of the whole is adjourned. Everyone have a great day, great evening, great weekend.
Thank you.
See you in a couple hours.